Do you think, Jim, we can ever hope, let's say in 25 years' time, to have a standard of living as high as it is here now? One of the phrases you've used in your recent book is sustainable retreat. What do you mean by that? And I'd like then Prince Carlos to answer what you say.
Well, I envisage climate change as happening slightly worse than the IPCC predicts. Remember, we've asked 1,000 of the world's best, more than 1,000, to gather together and predict what the climate will do for the next part of the century. Personally, I think they're unwise. You can't predict that far ahead. You certainly can't in economics. And there's not a lot of difference between the economics of the world and the climate. They're both highly nonlinear systems, and prediction is really not a safe thing to do. But assuming that the IPCC is more or less right, then things ahead will have reached those sorts of stages in perhaps as little as a couple of decades.
Well, I disagree. No, I agree with how bad the climate situation is that completely. But does it mean that we'll do a step backwards? I don't know. I mean, for how long have we walked this earth? A couple of 100,000 years. We've only been looking forward and been pushing forward, looking for more safety, more green area, and more comfort. It's very difficult to change that movement that we have had the last 50,000 years, and especially the last 200 years. An enormous growth in that, to change that back. Nobody wants to do a step backwards, and therefore they'll fight to stay at the same level or better. And it is also an immense motivator to solve the problems with this in mind. A lot of the solutions, I mean, in the beginning we said we're selling light bulbs, and I said, that's stupid, we're not selling light bulbs, we're selling light, we're selling a service, we're selling comfort, we're selling, and that at a better price. This is just one example, but the same, so it's cheaper and we do the same thing and better. So you can evolve, grow forward in quality, not just in not necessarily in quantity. One of the other things about these technologies, and this is not just one, I brought this one just as one example of about 30 of them, but the fact is that these things last 35 years. That's what we've been able to test, and they could last even longer, up to 40 or 50 years. So it doesn't need, I mean, we're not talking about more consumerism, but more a change from consumerism to a growth in quality rather than growth in quantity. I think that is a change.
So our standard of living will be as high?
Or higher. Could be.
Can I just interject
Yeah.
here? That I'm not worried about technical innovation. That will proceed, I've no doubt, and will alleviate quite a lot of our troubles. I'm just worrying about food and energy, the two vitals. With 7 billion growing on steadily towards 8 billion, the Earth cannot produce enough for us. Technology can maybe synthesize food from raw chemicals, but we're not going to have that tomorrow, or even in less than about 30 or 40 years, even if we started now.
No, I agree. We will go through some really, really rough spots, as you said, in the future. But it doesn't mean that eventually we won't outgrow even that. I mean, it could be in the worst case scenario that we have a huge dieback, and then we have enough space to go back to our current level, but through a big heavy dip. But eventually we're going to go up. It's in our nature and it's in our system. We can't.
I wouldn't disagree at all.
John, anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, as someone with kids, I worry about that a lot. I mean, and I think, part of what troubles me is this great disparity in wealth that exists in the world. And if you look at how do you solve this deforestation problem, how do you address these environmental issues, wealth is really at the root of it. So if we're going to rise up, the large portion of the world that needs it, where's it going to come from? I would hope that in terms of our own standard of living that we can sort of redefine what wealth means, in kind of this way of, it's not about over-consuming at big box retail, and certainly there's a huge room for improvement just in sort of living smarter and consuming those things that are really important and maybe not so much the excess. Food obviously is, that's a fundamental requirement, but look how much food is wasted in the developed world. In the United States, I don't know the number, tons and tons of food is wasted. Hugely inefficient.
30%.
Ideas like it's not very efficient to eat cows. I mean, I grew up in Texas, ranching community, but those ideas spread across the internet. You know, how much feed has to go into a cow to consume the beef at the other end, and how much methane comes out during that cycle. People are getting that data now, and you know, I think it will make, you know, people will act on that data as they come
You
back.
think the Texans are about to give up beef?
This one's thinking about it. I mean, you know, and it's it's about the information. I mean, it's not about, you know, fashion or law, or it's people understand what situation we're in, and I think people will make choices once they get the right information.